So welcome everyone to A Course in Miracles Satsang. It's just someone's just pointing to truth. That's literally it. Someone's just sitting down, pointing to it in a way that comes through them. There's always going to be a slight flavour to how something is expressed, but it'll always be the same message. But it's going to come through this vessel, and it's going to come through my voice, and something that probably has a little bit of flavour of Cate. But it's the same message. It's God's message of love, of just an open heart, an all-encompassing love, a love that encompasses all, which has no opposite. And that's our true home. And so where we find ourselves in bodies, in pain, in suffering, sickness, we're searching for a way out. We're searching for, we come to a place where nothing makes sense. Why would God make bodies that get sick? Why would God, have babies that are stillborn? Why would God have a world where, a virus comes in and kills people? Why would God have anything to do with that type of scenario? So our minds question. We come to curiosity. How could a loving God? A lot of religions just say it's a mystery, but there's no mystery to it. When you turn to the Course, there's no mystery at all. Everything is answered. It may not be the answer you want, but it's answered. If you really look deeply and read it, really see that its answer is that you're not a body, that this is a dream. This has no reality. What we're experiencing has no reality on our true self. Our true self is perfect, whole, and complete. Our true self is the infinite love of God. It has no form, but it can be experienced. It's not a void, and it's not nothingness, and it's not, when people call it empty, they mean empty of fear, empty of guilt, empty of blame. So who we are is an experience, not a thing, not an object. So we move more and more into the experience of the love, the infinite kindness, the infinite gentleness, the tender love of God. We come to lose our fear of God and come to know Him, not as a man or a woman or a body, but as something that's tangible, as an experience. We have to go home the way we came into this dream. First of all, we have to see that it's a dream. And then we have to say, this is my dream. Part of my mind wanted this. So we're going back home, and we're going back the way we came in. And for everyone that chooses to move back to God's mind, it happens very gently, because it's very strange that we fear God. We fear infinite love. We have no memory of it while we're here. We may have glimpses, but we are fearful of infinite love because we identify with a little self that's living in a world, and it has, it's got its own little life, and it's very sacred and special. And this is the ego. This is the ego the idea that I am separate, I'm a separate self and separate from everything else. So some of the things I do in the groups are really based on what I was guided as I was going on my journey back home. At the start, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know how I was going to undo the ego. My focus was to undo the ego. I'll just mute. Now, who was that on the Satsang? I'm trying to remember from last week. The hyphenated name. That was a nice name. Anyway. So, where was I? So in my journey, the focus was undoing. It's very important to focus on the undoing of the false and confirming to yourself who you are. So there's two aspects of our mind: undoing the false and confirming the truth. Activate the journey towards God, being in the mind of God, having your experience in the mind of God, which really just means that you sit in an all-encompassing love, because that's what God's mind is. So you're now, for me, I now experience the world very differently. I still see things with the eyes look and see things, but they're not the mind, the perception, or the mind that is used is completely different. It's just seen as everything is love. It's all God. It's love. And someone wrote to me, I think, after last week or in the last week or two, and said, if you see someone hurting someone else, do you see that as love? And I said, I'm not seeing what they're doing as love. I'm seeing that they are love. And so is the thing or the person they're hurting. So an aspect of love has fallen asleep and thinks it needs to hurt something for some reason. Whatever reason it chooses to hurt or harm, it's not bad. It's not guilty. It's just merely mistaken. Just like I was when I chose the ego. I was just mistaken. I simply was choosing a mind, a thought system that said, this is what you need to do to be happy in some way. It may not have been like those words, but that was the intention behind. The ego is always a thought system that always identifies you as separate, that you have these rights and you're special and you need to speak up and you need to show them that, you know, you need to attack back. And attack is very subtly held by the ego. The most subtle, unloving thought you will dismiss and justify, because the ego is very tricky and very subtle. And that's why Jesus says you have to be really vigilant for your mind. So our job is just to, you know, practice forgiveness for the rest of our lives when we need to. So when we get to a state of mind where we have our right-minded thoughts, where we're focusing on seeing the holiness of everyone and really living from that place, something occurs. Eventually there'll be a time where your mind just shifts all of a sudden, and you'll see, you will perceive, you will be aware of oneness, of God's infinite love. Revelation is an experience that you will have. Possibly you might have just had a second of something, or a couple of seconds, or you might have had hours or days, and then it leaves. Just a minute, I'm going to see if I can close my window a little bit more. So when we have experiences, when I had a revelatory experience, I still had more to let go. I still had obstacles to peace. I still had the fear of death, and that had to be overcome. The fear of God completely. So these obstacles to peace are put in order, really, of how you're going to go, how you're going to come to God. We can have to completely undo this idea that there is a God that's punishing us. Completely let go, really hold not one thought that God caused anything. You know, that God caused my car accident to teach me a lesson. You know, I was somehow caught up in that thinking for years, and it really has to go. You really have to be vigilant to catch those thoughts that God put someone in your life to do something, cause something bad. Everyone in our life is there for forgiveness, but God isn't punishing us. God is not trying to, give us these really crazy lessons or anything. We have to be really clear that we have our lessons, but God's not making it hard or sending us someone who's trying to derail our Course in Miracles studies or something like that. Do you know what I mean? So it's just a very subtle way for the ego to use this idea of an unloving God. So you have to be, it's like the further you get into your studies with the Course, you'll probably find that the ego goes from being very vicious to being very subtle. You have to really be aware of it. And how you become aware is when you find yourself not living in the peace and joy, where you start thinking again, where you have a lot of thoughts. And really that's it. And you're going to, for a long period of time, sort of be, jumping from horse to horse. You know how he says you can't ride two horses. Well, really what we're doing is we're jumping on the ego and then jumping back on the Holy Spirit. Or as I made a little video about, listening to the prosecutor lawyer. We're listening to the ego, and he can just be sitting there whispering in our ear saying, look, he really is bad. Come on. He can just be that. Come on now. Look at this. Look at what he did. It doesn't matter whether it's Donald Trump, whether it's Joe Biden, whether it's for anyone, wherever you are. Our politics is getting very seemingly attacking here just in the last few weeks. It was really beautiful. Everyone was working together, but all of a sudden it has to change, and that's the nature. So we have to be really, really careful that our mind doesn't enter into any type of opinions. It doesn't really matter who's in charge. because our life is in God, not in this world. We have to come back into our mind and find all our safety and protection in God. We can't ask a politician or somebody handling the virus. There's no protection here as a body. If we identify as a body, there's no protection for bodies. In the dream, it's like a video game. The body gets shot and then it pops up again. You know, it has so many lives, and we're like that. We can't be attached to our life here. There's no attachment to anything. So we're taken through the obstacles to peace. Rachel has just said, I feel really stuck on how to give up identification as a body. I want peace. So I'm just going to answer that. I'm just going to read that. How can I stop feeling so attached to what happens to my body? Yeah, so a few people have said that, yeah, as I said, the government isn't the answer, God is. God is my Father and He loves His Son. So how can I stop feeling so attached to what happens to my body? We have to very, very slowly stop identifying as a body and move more into identifying a spirit. And that just takes as long as it takes. If you can do the lessons really well, the lessons are where, the text is very good. It sets the framework. Just trying to find. So there's no magic pill you can take and say, hey, how do I stop doing that? What you do is, it's up to you. It's everyone's responsibility to choose. No one's forcing you to identify as a body. The only choice we have here is to practice the lessons, read the text, and choose the Holy Spirit. Choose Jesus. Choose Jesus's lessons. So the lessons of the Course start to become a unified thought system. They make a unified thought system in our mind. The lessons, that's why he says, you don't have to believe them. It's the practice of them that helps you. The repeating them, the thinking of them, whatever he's asking us to do, we have to remember that we're the ones that are suffering, and Jesus is the one telling us he's got the way out. And when we open the Course and we do a lesson and we decide that we don't want to do it that way, we're literally saying, I'm saying no to my way home. We have to really give up knowing how we're going to become free. So, Rachel, how is to follow the teachings of Jesus in the Course in Miracles. Follow them completely. Do the best you can. Don't beat yourself up, but just give yourself over, because his teachings tell you that they lead to peace. They may not be easy, and they're not at times, because the ego fights back, but they lead you to it. So in 5 years' time from now, we'll all be further along if we're constantly practicing these teachings, or we can be exactly where we are now without doing them. We really have to have that desire. We have to say, look, you know, this message seems strange. It's telling me that I'm not a body and I'm not even in a world and there is no world. It's telling me some unusual things. But when you first hear that, it's going to be startling. And then after a while, you're going to become more and more comfortable with that message. And then there's going to come a time where you say, yes, this makes perfect sense. It doesn't mean you deny the world or deny the body. You come to see it differently. You come to perceive it as not threatening you because you're identifying more as spirit. I just like to call that the love of God, because really, what is the mind of God? A beautiful, all-encompassing love. So that's what we're going to be experiencing ourselves as love, and all fear is going to drop away from our minds. So it's going to be the peace that passeth understanding. So we're going to go past these obstacles as we journey towards peace, and peace is going to flow across them. So if you have any questions as we read on today, or just when I get to the end, you can pose your question maybe in the chat. And if you don't know how to get to the chat, you can unmute yourself and ask. So I'll just, if I don't remember to ask for questions, just butt in and say, hey, you're going to do some questions. I like my little group, the other little group, because they always tell me what I was going to do. Alrighty, so we were just getting up to the end of last week. We were going through the desire to get rid of peace. And remember, it was all about the little wall that we had between our brother and ourselves. And so last week it was about where the meditation was trying to take down that wall, was just saying, I want that little wall to go, the judgments that I have against my brother. I'm ready to move past them. So the meditation was holding that, maybe the brother that your mind has decided is the guilty one, the bad one, and blames them and sees attack there. And so the peace will flow across to them. The wall will come down and the peace in your mind will flow across, and you will see that person differently. And what happens when we practice this enough, you will see everyone the same, the Holy Son of God, which is nothing to do with how a body looks. Because these bodies, these avatars, are very different looking, and they're set up so that we choose separation by choosing the voice that highlights comparisons, and it uses lots of comparisons. You know, skin colour, eye colour, hair colour, how many wrinkles you've got, how big the body is, how little the body is. Everything the ego uses to compare. So when we do the meditation and we just join, all that rubbish is just left behind. All that ego thoughts is just dropped. It doesn't take long to just focus on the beauty of our brother. And this is the healing for us. We have to remember that when we do this, we are choosing to move from hell into heaven. It's for us. It's got nothing to do with them. What they choose affects them. Everyone that chooses the ego suffers. When we choose the Holy Spirit, we move out of suffering and into peace and natural health. And so that's what can motivate us. That's what motivated me, definitely. I wanted peace. I wanted to be free of pain. I wanted to have a peaceful mind. I wanted to be free of all sickness. And that's been my experience now for a long time, because I am very vigilant and I chose to follow Jesus' teachings here to the letter. I didn't always know what I was being told, didn't always understand the lessons, but I did them, just did them. And I just became a friend of Jesus. I just called him friend, just took his hand and said, I don't know. I don't know how to be free. I've got no idea. So that's what he wants us to do. He wants us to be, I don't know. Can you show me? Can you show me how I should look upon everyone? So whenever I come across anything on my journey, I just say, look, I don't know. This is what I think I'm seeing. When I had thought I had a bully at work, I just said to him, honestly, it seems like there's a big bully at work. That's my perception. You're going to have to help me here, because I want to be free of this. I wanted desperately to be free of the fear of the bully. And so through my willingness to do everything I was guided to do, that idea that someone could bully me was completely let go of. And I came to see this woman very, very differently. And I just had a heart of love for her in the end. And that's it. So I talked last week about my neighbour. Someone mentioned that he was knocking on my door to talk to me about my dog. I just wanted to share a little bit about that. He used to walk past the side fence of my unit and the dog would bark at him. That area was only for residents where we lived, and he didn't like the dog barking at him as he walked past. So, as we know, dogs bark. So I just wanted to share that, and I did try to get my dog to reduce her barking at him when he walked past. So it wasn't just because if someone has thought that a dog was barking a lot and I wasn't respecting his wishes, I did when I could try to get my dog. You know what dogs are like, they bark. So my dog wasn't an excessive barker, but she was just what I would deem quite a normal barking dog. And dogs bark. And so that's something that, if he was practicing forgiveness, he would just come to see that dogs bark, cats meow, like Byron Katie says. But if someone asks us to do something, he did ask me if there was something I could do. I did. I did try, I did my best to keep my dog from barking too much, but it did reduce a bit. So I wanted to share that I did honour him. He's a holy son of God and he's asking me for something. So I did do that. But he still knocked on my door, and that was okay too. So this is just to really show the practical application of these teachings, that we're really acknowledging everyone as our holy brother and not keeping the special friends and the special enemies in two camps. And this is the time where you really, when you're in those particular situations, you really need to be asking the Holy Spirit for guidance on what to do and what to say and how to act. Obviously, you're going to always be acting loving, but the Holy Spirit is really in charge of your journey to awakening, the undoing, and what's required. So there is we have the teaching of the Course, but we all also have our own unique journey. We all have the same, we think that it's all different forgiveness lessons, but it's all the one problem and all the one answer. But we get into specifics, and we have to, because that's where we are. We have to work with where we're at. Whatever's troubling you, you can't just spiritualize it. You have to work with it. If something is bothering you, you have to give it attention and say, Holy Spirit, this is what's really upsetting me at the moment. I call you in to help me look at it. When you get further and further down the track, and you'll spot it, you can just say, no, I'm not interested. But there at the beginning, you need to look at it very clearly with the Holy Spirit or Jesus and say, be very clear, because you want to get a completely different view, another perception of that person, event, or situation. That's what takes you home. And how that occurs is unique for you. But it's the same, we're all getting the same answer, because it's the one Holy Spirit voice, the echo of God, his voice, coming into our mind while we're dreaming this dream. So I got up to, it's page 409 in the FIP version. You don't need to read unless you really want to. You can just sit quietly and listen to me read. So up to paragraph 9. How mighty can a little feather be before the great wings of truth? So it's really talking here about the ego. It's really nothing. He's telling us, this is what we're trying to go past. This tiny little feather, and yet the great wings of truth, beautiful, big, strong wings that we're riding on, is what this is where we are, in those beautiful, strong wings of truth. Can it oppose an eagle's flight or hinder the advance of summer? Can it interfere with the effects of summer's sun upon a garden covered by snow? See but how easily this little wisp is lifted up, then carried away, never to return, and part with it in gladness, not regret. For it is nothing in itself, and stood for nothing, when you had greater faith in its protection. Would you not rather greet the summer sun than fix your gaze upon a disappearing snowflake and shiver in remembrance of the winter's cold? So that's the end of that section, and that's really just telling us not to spend any time missing anything of the ego's judgment. He's just sort of giving us sort of symbols or analogies here. I'm just going to have a little drink. So the next section is the attraction to guilt. And just before I go on and talk about this section, it's interesting when you just hear that word attraction to guilt. Because I know when I first heard that term, I thought to myself, I don't think I'm attracted to guilt. I don't like guilt. I don't think I'm attracted to it at all. So it was a sort of a bit further along the path that I realised that I was choosing it. So this is an interesting, we have to become aware that the ego is the voice for guilt, and we're choosing it. we're not the ego. We're the one that chooses the ego. So I came to see that I wanted to choose guilt. I wanted to feel guilty and bad, and I wanted to make other people guilty and bad. So I might say I'm joining the ego's thoughts of that, but initially that's how we have to see it. We have to really, like we're in prep, which is, I don't know whether you have that in kindergarten or whatever, preparation school, preparatory school here, we call it prep. And we have kindergarten as well. So basically, we have to really become like kindergarten children in this course to start with. Now, some of you have probably been through kindergarten and you're in grade 3 or grade 4 or something. But to start with, if you ever get really troubled, greatly, really overwhelmed, you have to go back to kindergarten. You have to go back and say, what helped me when I was in kindergarten with the course? Because there can come at times this idea that you know something and you've got it and you don't need to practice how you used to. You don't need to do that. You've done that for years. You've moved on. No, that's an ego catch as well. So I always just say, I'm in kindergarten and I'll just stay there because I really love kindergarten teachers. And it's really nice, isn't it? Because in kindergarten, you can just play with the Play-Doh and you can play outside in the mud and you can just know nothing. And you can just have fun and play with your friends and climb the trees and just really be like a little child. You don't have to know anything in kinder. You're getting taught everything. And no one's saying, hey, you don't know something, here's a test. So it's a really freedom. And in this world, in the ego's world, everybody's like, oh, don't you know that? Oh, you better study up on that and read about it and know about it. So knowledge of the ego's world is held in high esteem in the ego's world. But in the Holy Spirit's world, it's really about being in kinder and just enjoying and happily laughing and singing songs and reading books and playing outside. So really, if you want to really enjoy your life and be free, just think of yourself as being in kinder and Jesus is the teacher. Holy Spirit and Jesus are our teachers. And it can be when you're a child, when you're 5 years old and you go to kinder, you don't have any idea when you enter the room what you're going to do for the day or how you're going to do it. Penelope has just said, I'll just read your message, Penelope. Louise Hay says, how do you know it's dissolved? How do you know it's dissolved until it doesn't trigger you anymore? If it comes up again, there's just more work to do. That's it. And what I found, and most of you probably know this, is it comes around. So it seems to, that issue seems to leave you for a little while and then it comes back. But what you probably notice is that when it returns, it doesn't have the bite. The ego doesn't have the bite that it used to have. Annalise just saying there's a beautiful symbol of the kindergarten, right? So when you're in kindergarten, if you can think back now, if you didn't go to kinder, something that you went to as a child where you just went and played, where you just felt free. It might have been childcare or you went, or made, I don't know, something will be brought to your mind. The Holy Spirit will bring something into your mind right now. And you didn't make anyone guilty at kinder. Someone might have stolen your book while you were reading it because they wanted to read it. And you might have cried for a few seconds and then just turned around and got another book. I've had a look at children in kindergarten and even my own children. And they just used to cry for a few minutes and then get over it and move on to something else. So yeah, the sandbox is another great analogy. So we're all in a big sand pit just playing. So this is really because, yeah, Annalise, someone stole my book and I moved on. Yeah, this is, there's no, in life, if someone steals something from you, you might have a moment of, oh, I've lost that. That's okay. That's all right to have that. But you'll very quickly move on like I do and just say, oh, they really must wanted that. I give it to them. So I always give whatever, if something is stolen, I always give it to them and just say, I really bless you. I hope you have that. I mean, we don't lock our house. We haven't locked our house for years and years. And people are like, well, aren't you worried? And I just say, if someone wanders in here and wants something, they can have it because I don't own anything. So I'm using the things here, but I don't own them. And I'm free of ownership. I've got things and I'm using them for practical purposes. But in a kindergarten, you don't own anything. You're just using the sand pit, the little pool that you play in summer, and you go outside and the food's all there supplied. It just comes as you get hungry, there's something. This is really the basis of the happy dream, is that analogy where you don't walk into the kindergarten and say, oh, I'm really worried about where I'm going to get lunch from today, and sit there nervous and worried all day about where lunch is going to come from. You don't, because you don't have the thought of lack or very little ideas of lack at that stage. So in the self versus self-concept area, he says that we build a self-concept as we go along. So that self-concept has to be undone, and that self-concept is that self-identity, and it is starting to form when we're in kinder, but it's really less. So it's an analogy I'm using just to help us try to remember when we were in kindergarten and how free and happy we were. And that can really just help bring to your mind some idea of how we're going to be when we let go of the ego. It's not the things of the kinder, it was our state of mind, that we were free of concern, of worry, of planning, of using the past. So a great analogy to point us, to help us become like little children and say, look at the teacher and say, Jesus, you're the teacher. And actually, if we're happy and free in the kinder, he'd just laugh and say, you've got it all. My teaching is done. Because you're laughing and just going, wee, having fun. And that's really it. God's will for us is perfect happiness. So, when you're in the kindergarten and everything's new and exciting and you're playing and discovering, that's really he says, become like little children. We're going to become very, very playful, very joyful, very free, very unconcerned. So this attraction to guilt, we have to say, I have to be attracted to guilt because Jesus is telling me I am. So wherever we read something in the Course that he's telling us, we have to say, I don't feel that I'm attracted to guilt, but I have to be because he's my teacher and he's telling me I am. So therefore, I say, you're right, Jesus, I'm wrong. Show me how I'm attracted to guilt. Okay, so you might sit down and think about some of the things that you feel guilty about. And you might say, okay, I'm attracted. Now, I'll just say, give you an example that's coming into my mind now. As a mother, I had a lot of guilt over things that I'd done with my children. And I had to say, so that ego sort of has this idea that if you feel guilty about something, it will cause you to be a better mother, right? That's its analogy. So that's why we're attracted to it, because the ego says the guilt, if you feel guilty enough and bad enough about something, you'll change. But so that's the ego's version. And then, so when you say, okay, I'm a bad and guilty mother, I shouldn't have done this. When you say to the ego, what should I do to counteract that guilt? The ego will never give you just be love. That's the Holy Spirit's answer. So, you know, I always wanted to do this course very practically. I didn't want to try to spiritualize anything. I wanted to do it in my way, just looking at my life. So I said, look, I feel terrible guilt about the things that I did and didn't do. Holy Spirit, look at this with me and tell me how I'm not guilty. So what I was shown was, when I was very depressed and I didn't get out of bed to make my daughter's lunch for school, or maybe wasn't there to help her with her homework or be around her enough, the Holy Spirit just showed me that I was really under the influence of the ego. I was very depressed and sad and tired, and I stayed in bed a lot. And he said, you have to let go of that, because you were really like asleep in a dream of the ego. And if you can let go of it quickly, you'll be more helpful to your children now in this dream lifetime than ever before. So stop going back to the past and rehashing the guilt. Let it go. You were under the influence of the ego, and so is everyone here. So forgive yourself, let it go. You chose, you weren't bad. You didn't know any different. I didn't know I had a Holy Spirit mind available to me. So I really just forgave myself and just said, look, I did the best I could at the time. Let go of all the guilt from the past, what I did with my children, and judgment of that, and moved on. And doing that and choosing that and not being attracted back to it all the time by saying, look how bad I was and look how bad I am now, which is the ego thought system. I'm perpetuating the guilt in the present then, and I'm not helpful to anyone around me, any mind that wants to awaken. When I perpetuate and get attracted to guilt and think guilt has anything to offer me. So if you've got anything in your past, whether if you've not had children, maybe you've got past relationships with parents, siblings, let it go. Whatever you did, if you were mean, if you wrote something nasty, if you cut someone out of your life for a while, which I did, I cut my dad out of my life for a few years, let it go. Start afresh. Just draw a line in the sand and say, today's a new day. Let all that go. Now I am the love of God, and you don't have to do anything. All you need to do is let it go and say, I'm not going to choose guilt. No one's guilty. So just reading the attraction of guilt. The attraction of guilt produces fear of love. For love would never look on guilt at all. So love would never look on guilt at all, but the Holy Spirit would look upon it and judge against it. So that's sort of what and I'm sure many of you have gone through that same process. It is the nature of love to look upon only the truth, for there it sees itself, with which it would unite in holy union and completion. So, you know, when I looked back and was ready to let go of all the guilt that I felt, I actually united with my true self in holy union and completion, you could say. I was really coming into my true self because I'd let things go. So as love must look past fear, so must fear see love not. For love contains the end of guilt, as surely as fear depends on it. So love, coming into being this all-encompassing love right now, means the end of guilt. So love right now, because you're only ever in the now. So love, feeling love now for our children and everyone around us, that contains the end of guilt, because you can't have an all-encompassing love and guilt in your mind at the same time. That's why perfect love casts out fear. So perfect love is the end of guilt and fear. For love contains the end of guilt as surely as fear depends upon it. Love is attracted only to love. Overlooking guilt completely, it sees no fear. Being wholly without attack, it could not be afraid. Fear is attracted to what love sees not, and each believes that what the other looks upon does not exist. So when somebody thinks someone else is guilty or their self is guilty, they're using the ego to look upon themselves or others. And love, which is the Holy Spirit here, he doesn't see guilt in yourself or anyone else. And he's saying here that each believes, so if someone thinks someone's guilty or yourself is guilty, you would think that what the other looks upon does not exist. So it's really like we push out of our awareness that some other perception exists. So when we're living in guilt, we can't perceive that there's another perception. And if someone came along and said, it's all love, I'm not guilty, when you're under the influence of the ego with guilt, you think, you can't imagine what that's like. As each has messengers which it sends forth and which return to it with messages written in the language in which their going forth was asked. Now we're going to go into this great section of the course here where he sort of talks about these hungry dogs, and he's giving an analogy here just like he did on the other page with the wings of the eagle and the snow and the sun. So he's coming into, I'm just going to read this through, but this section really helped me when I was reading it years ago. It helped me really identify that if I'm got a belief in guilt and I'm with the ego in my guilty thoughts, I'm going to find that in the world, in others, in situations somewhere. And this is another analogy of perception makes projection. So what mind I'm in, I'm going to see. So when I'm joining the ego, and I'm in the ego mind when I join it, there's no separation between me and the ego. I can't see that I am the observer observing the ego. I'm fully enmeshed in the ego in this state. So he's talking about when we're fully enmeshed in the ego, and then we look out So this world has absolutely no meaning. It's just images walking around and sounds out of mouths and body movements. That's really, it's like looking at a movie on a screen. It's just images on a screen. So that's all this world is images on a screen moving around. And everything we find there is coming from our mind, no exception. So this is how we know what we need to let go of or forgive, what we're going to find. So how do we know what's left? Is what we're going to find in the images, what we're going to think the images are doing. If the images are guilty, if the images are bad, okay, I've got some work to do. Holy Spirit, I think the image is bad. I think this image is guilty. Help me see it differently, because I can't get to the answer because I'm stuck in the ego. I can't get out of it myself. That's why the answer is always calling on the Holy Spirit or Jesus for another way. That's why we're little children in the kindergarten saying, hey, you know, if you've got your legs stuck in the playground equipment, you might just call, hey, I need help. So Jesus wants us to become like little children. Hey, I need help now. So anytime we say, hey, I've just thought someone's guilty about this, I need help. So that's what we want to, just simply that, just simply calling for help. We're in a classroom and we're just calling, hey, I've just thought that someone's guilty, or I think someone's bad or attacking me. Okay, Holy Spirit, help me. I've got a misperception. And that's it. And that's really the way to truth. That's all I did for 2 years was, okay, I think I'm saying this, I think this one's saying this, help me. And it becomes, you know, he talks about the happy learner, which just really means that you're happy to get the help. You're happy to call on the help. So one of the things that we have to remember is we can't get out of our misperceptions ourselves. We have to have some other perception come in, and that's the miracle, shifting from how I'm seeing the guilt there, because I'm unconsciously projecting it, not knowing that. But we'll see, when you sit quietly and you ask for help, you'll see what you did. The Holy Spirit will show you everything. It will show you how you thought you were guilty. It'll show you something that you thought about during the week about this person, how you felt guilty, and then you met them, and how you projected the guilt onto them, and how you made them wrong, and they said this and they're bad. It'll just show you. It'll be like you view the whole thing like you're watching yourself with them, watching your life, what you did. And there's no judgment. You're just being shown what you did. And you'll undo it that way. You'll really be shown. You'll get it. You'll get the seeing of it. You'll see how the ego works if you really want to join the Holy Spirit. It's in your mind. It's your right mind correcting your wrong-minded thoughts. So to start off, this is the Holy Spirit. Love's messages are gently sent and returned with messages of love and gentleness. So it's like, if you can imagine, you know, with the first 2 lessons of the course, it says nothing I see means anything. So everything I look at means nothing. It has no meaning at all. And I have given it all the meaning it has. So the meaning it's going to have is love, God's mind of love and the Holy Spirit's. It's going to get gently sent out. So what's that tree mean? And it's going to return with love and gentleness. Oh, that's God, that's love, that tree's love. And so it's going to send the messages back. The Holy Spirit's mind, your loving mind is going to find in the world what is in your mind. That's all we ever do. That's the best thing. If you can understand that what the world's representing is what's in your mind, you can work out how much forgiveness you've got to do. That's what I realized. I just said to bring it on, like bring me anything that needs healing, because if you can say anything I'm finding in the world is the obstacle for me to be in peace, then I want to find it. So I would actually put myself in situations where there'd be big triggers, seemingly, and then I was able to laugh at. I went onto some. Facebook's a wonderful place. Social media, anything, the news. Use it. It's all there to show you what's left in your mind to forgive. So go in all the places that you think, oh, I don't want to go there. Go there and say, let's use this. Let's use this Facebook. Let's get into some really, you don't have to do it all the time, but you can use it to say, what's left in my mind? What beliefs do I still have? Is there anything that I'm holding on to, that a judgment on my brother, a judgment on anything? And I remember one time I went into this Facebook group and they all hated A Course in Miracles. And I started sort of saying all this stuff about Helen and Bill and the Course. And I stayed in there and I said, I have to wash out every attachment, any belief I have, any desire I have for someone to like the Course or to, because that's another idol. It all has to go. Everything has to go. You can't hold on to anything. And I just blessed them and laughed, because do I need for someone to say something nice about the Course or nice about Helen for me to experience the love of God? So you'll find as you get closer to the end, you really, for me, I just said, just bring Holy Spirit, if I've got anything left in my mind that I'm attached to or set up any idols, I want to be completely free of every idol. So bring it on. Show me where I'm attached to something. You know, so I went through the death experience. I went through, I think just the fear of God. I don't know how that just got removed as I went along. I don't remember any big experience with the bully at work, with my dad, with my children, everything. Even my child seemingly as a drug addict, that completely changed. There's no belief that anyone's a drug addict, because that doesn't even mean anything to me anymore. So all these things have to be undone. So it's just really like giving over your life and saying, my life is not about getting anything. It's about undoing. It's about undoing everything I have idolized or I'm attached to. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have things, little preferences that are okay. You know, if you like, as I've said before, your cup of tea made a certain way, or you like to have some fresh orange juice or a meal cooked a certain way, that's okay, but just don't be attached to it. You don't be devastated if you can't get it or it can't be done that way. It means that your peace of mind doesn't change. You don't want to idolize anything or hold it up that your happiness is attached to it. So that's really the crux of it. And that's a really good way to look at this, to just bring into your life and just say, okay, today is all about, living in the love of God. And if there's anything that I've got in my mind that needs healing, bring it on. Don't run away from anything. Follow your guidance. But that's just because you want the peace of God. So you want anything that's stopping that for the Holy Spirit to correct. So that's really it. And that's accepting the atonement, is having that great desire and willingness to turn everything around, like Ben Wapnick says, treat it as a classroom. I can hear some noise now. Let me see. Is there someone? I saw. Okay, I'm not sure. Anyway. Oh, Laurie, I'll just mute you there. Okay. She's just moved down. Okay. So
Kate, I have to go to my meeting. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you very much. I loved everything I heard. Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
George, love you, buddy. Bye.
Bye-bye. Love you too.
Okay. So love's messages are gently sent, return with messages of love. So everything comes from our state of mind. So we're going to find in the world what's in our mind. That's how it works. That's how it works. It doesn't work any other way. The world's not doing something to me. It's coming from me. I'm finding what's in my mind. I'm finding it in the world. And that's part of doing the course, is coming to accept that. And once you accept that, you really can work with it. If you want to be peaceful, you have to accept these, whether they make sense or not. You have to entertain them. You have to entertain all these ideas. You're not going to, some people probably get it like that. As I said, I class myself as a spiritual dummy. I didn't know these things. I didn't know how to do the course. I didn't understand it. So I just came, like, I went into the kindergarten room and just said, I don't know anything. And then realised later on that that's what he wanted us to do. So I didn't talk about the course to anyone. I didn't get on Facebook at that stage and argue, and I wasn't in big groups discussing the course. I wasn't interested in the discussion of the course's teachings. I was interested in, what do I do to get to peace? That was all I was interested in. I didn't care about knowing the right terminology. I just wanted to be peaceful. I wanted this peace of God. It wasn't easy, but if you can reorientate and just don't enter any discussions about the teachings and what this means and what that means, don't bother with it. It doesn't help. You want to orientate your mind to, what's left in my mind to heal? What are the obstacles still to heal? Okay, I have a fear of death. All right, we have a fear of death. Okay, be honest. Okay, I have the fear of death. I think I'm a body, like that question before. I feel like I'm a body and I'm scared and I'm worried. I have the fear of death. Well, what's the answer? The Course's teachings. Join with the Holy Spirit and Jesus. They will help you. That's it. Do the lessons. This is a teaching. This is a teaching for us to get us past. So now we're going to talk about the messages of fear. The messages of fear are harshly ordered to seek out guilt and cherish every scrap of evil and of sin they can find, losing none of them on pain of death and laying them respectively before their Lord and Master. This section's pretty gory, and you know, it just really, Jesus is really telling us about just telling us how awful this is when we feel guilty and we send out the scavengers of guilt to find guilt somewhere else. Perception cannot obey two masters, each asking for messages of different things in different languages. So you've got love sending out the messages, love, finding love, and you've got guilt sending its messages out. Where can I find some guilt? Looking, who can I find to make guilty? What fear would feed upon, love overlooks. What fear demands, love cannot even see. The fierce attraction that guilt holds for fear is wholly absent from love's gentle perception. What love would look upon is meaningless to fear and quite invisible. So what he's talking about here, when he says love looks on, he's talking about really healed perception. Or when you ask the Holy Spirit, help me look at this, he will look past this and bring love's messages. He'll bring love into your mind. He'll correct your perception, which is the miracle. You will feel more love. You'll experience more love, more happiness and more peace, and you will find it in the world. And when this starts to happen to you and you start to find how the world changes as you change your mind and you take ownership and you accept these teachings, as he's saying. You accept that this is that what he's saying is true and what we've believed in the past is untrue. As you move into this, you'll start to really experience periods of much more peace and quiet, and really feeling this holiness aspect of your mind and your experience. Relationships in this world are the result of how the world is seen. So how we see the world is going to be how our relationships are. And that's what happens. I remember years ago, I just said, I want all my relationships loving. I was so sick and tired of all the crap that I had in my relationships with everyone. I blamed everyone. I wanted everyone to change, you know, and this is when you read the lessons, he says, you know, the ego looks out and says, I'd be happy if someone changed. I went, oh, okay, that's what I was doing. So it's really not to make yourself guilty. It's really just a gentle correction. So we just laugh at ourselves and say, well, it's a little bit like being under the influence of alcohol. You know, you say, oh, look, they're under the influence of alcohol. They did that and that. We just say, look, I was under the influence of the ego. So I tried to get everyone to change. And so does everyone else. Everyone's trying to, you know, it's just the way the ego works. And this depends on which emotion was called on to send its messages to look upon it and return with word of what they saw. So he says here, and this depends on which emotion was called on to send its messages. So the emotion of guilt. So when I feel really guilty about something, you can guarantee I'm going to find it in someone, somewhere, some way. My messages, the messages of guilt, are going to find it. Fear's messages are trained through terror, and they tremble when their master calls on them to serve him. This is the good bit. For fear is merciless, even to its friends. Its messengers steal guiltily away in hungry search for guilt, for they are kept cold and starving and made very vicious by their master, who allows them to feast only upon what they return to him. It's pretty savage, isn't it? I remember, you know, I mainly made my father guilty in my life. I made other people guilty, people at work and things like that. But the hungry, the viciousness, I really projected so much guilt onto my dad. And I did. I feasted upon them. I really did. We have to be really honest when he says these things. It's not going to make us feel bad. It's going to help us when we're really honest and say, yeah, I really, really, really tried to make him guilty. But the messages in my mind were really telling me that I was really guilty for some of the things I'd said to him and cutting him off. And so the guilt had to be projected out because we can't stand the guilt. No little shred of guilt escapes their hungry eyes. And so when I projected onto my dad, it was like anything he said or did, or anything someone told me about in the family, there was like I feasted on it. I'd be saying, yeah, and what did he do then, and we'd talk about it, and we'd really get into, there was this, and I used to feel terrible doing it, but it was like there was this attraction to feasting on this guilt about how guilty, how bad he was. And in their savage search for sin, they pounce on any living thing they see and carry it screaming to their master to be devoured. And this is he's not holding any punches here. We have to look. Yeah, I did that. Yes, I devoured. Oh gosh, I wanted to find him guilty. I'd go to work and I'd find someone guilty there and I'd devour that. They were all to blame. So this is what we do. We have to be honest and say, I'm doing this. Not that I'm just doing it. Send not these savage messages into the world to feast upon it and to prey upon reality. For they bring you word of bones and skin and flesh. They have been taught to seek the corruptible and return with gorges filled with things decayed and rotted. Ugh. So really, you can think about, how you feel when you feast upon that guilt, when you really, really want to slam into someone and you really feel like you really feast on that. And, you're really in the story about how bad they are, how terrible, how unloving. They're guilty of all these things. And really, it's like you're feasting on rotten and decayed thoughts. They're really like you're eating the rotted and decayed thoughts, and you feel so bad. You just feel awful, but you think for some reason it's that there's some attraction to it, but it's really, it's terrible when we do this. But we can't help but do it because we're with the ego, and this is what the ego does. It sends out its messages, its messengers. The Holy Spirit has given you love's messages to send instead of those you trained through fear. So I've forgotten that I'm actually doing this, that I'm condoning it, that I'm wanting it, and that I'm attracted to it. I've actually forgotten it. I've pushed it out of my awareness that I want to feast on this rotting thoughts. So I need to, that's when we do that, and we just say, I'm feeling, to me, what I was doing was causing me to have the sickness that I was having. The chronic fatigue, the constant tonsillitis and flu, a constant tiredness and fatigue, because I was finding it. And that's what happens when you feast on decayed and rotted messengers' thoughts. So the Holy Spirit is going to now bring us messages of love. They are as eager to return to you what they hold dear as are the others. If you send them forth, they will see only the blameless and the beautiful, the gentle and the kind. They will be as careful to let no little act of charity, no tiny expression of forgiveness, no little breath of love escape their notice, and they will return with all the happy things they found to share them lovingly with you. Be not afraid of them. They offer you salvation. Theirs are the messages of safety, for they see the world as kind. If you send forth only the messengers the Holy Spirit gives you, wanting no messages but theirs, you will see fear no more. The world will be transformed before your sight, cleansed of all the guilt and softly brushed with beauty. The world contains no fear that you laid not upon it, and none you cannot ask love's messages to remove from it and see it still. The Holy Spirit has given you his messengers to send to your brother and return to you with what love sees. They have been given to replace the hungry dogs of fear you sent instead. And they go forth to signify the end of fear. Love too would set a feast before you on a table covered with a spotless cloth, set in a quiet garden where no sound but singing and a softly joyous whispering is ever heard. This is a feast that honours your holy relationship and at which everyone is welcomed as an honoured guest. And in a holy instant, grace is said by everyone together as they join in gentleness before the table of communion. And I will join you there, as long ago I promised, and I promise still. For in your new relationship am I made welcome, and where I am made welcome, there I am. I am made welcome in the state of grace, which means you have at last forgiven me. For I became the symbol of your sin, and so I had to die instead of you. So I'm just feeling just stop there. I felt to stop at the end of that paragraph and I read on, it just doesn't feel flowy. So I always gauge. It felt like I should read on, but that was my decision, not what was guided to do. So I couldn't really read that next section. I felt like no, stop. So let me just check the time. Okay. So we've gone for nearly an hour and a half. So it feels like a good time to stop here and do a little Christ meditation. And I actually really feel like why I was guided to stop was what I was getting as I was reading that last paragraph about being at a big table with what? Tablecloths and joined together. I was getting guided to call upon our group to imagine us all sitting together at a big table. And Jesus is with us, because this is what he's saying here. So let's do, I'll just read this again and get you to focus on, and let's imagine, let's do a little meditation. So he's saying here, love too would set a feast before you on a table covered with a spotless cloth set in a quiet garden where no sound but singing and a softly joyous whispering is ever heard. So as I'm reading this out, just imagine it. We'll join into this. This is a feast that honours your holy relationship, at which everyone is welcomed as an honoured guest. So just feel this beautiful quiet garden, the soft singing, and just feel that everyone is your honoured guest sitting around. Just imagine sitting in a big garden, beautiful big table, maybe under a tree, soft sun. And in a holy instant, grace is said by everyone together as they join together in gentleness before the table of communion. So maybe just in grace we can just thank. Let's feel this gratitude, thank you. Let's just keep saying thank you. And I will join you there. As long ago I promised and promise still. For in your new relationship am I made welcome. And where I am made welcome, there I am. So I'm just going to do this myself. So I'm just going to join everyone here and just imagine us sitting in a big garden. Beautiful singing, soft, warm light. Just feeling this joining. And feeling gratitude. Everyone is my honoured guest. And Jesus is there, he's with us. Now just imagine everyone, the whole world, sitting at this table. Everyone. Let's feel maybe your arms extending out to bring everyone into a huge big hug. Everyone is your honoured guest. Is there anyone in the group today that really feels I'd like the group to hold them in their minds as purity? Is there anyone really struggling with the ego overwhelm?
Yes, for sure, Kate.
Okay,
I
Anna.
really appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Annalie. So just, and Robin?
I was just going to say I would too. Thank you.
All right. So anyone else really would like our group to hold them?
Yeah, I would too. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Okay.
I would like to. Thank you.
Okay. So Nadia, Alison, Rachel, Robin, and Annalie. So there's 5. So let's the rest of us, and including yourselves, really bring these people into your mind. Really feel you're wrapping them up, your love, you're holding them as the pure Christ, holy, innocent, perfect, beautiful, absolutely adorable, the love of God, beautiful holiness. Just wrap them up in your mind and see only their beautiful holy self. And let's hold them there for a few minutes. Okay. One of the ways that we can help ourselves move into this way of seeing, because we're not used to it, we've got to practice it. This great method is to think about how Jesus would see us and then use that experience to look at others or look at ourselves. But the experience of being with Jesus, the Christ mind that has purity in his mind, how he looks at us is really the healing of our mind. And then we extend that when we react to others, respond to others through that, seeing the beauty, seeing the love, seeing only holiness, purity, divinity. So that's our job really, is to have our mind healed back to its pure essence, and then to extend that, be God's love in the world. And that's really just taking our part in God's plan. He will direct us. But we need purifying first. So we have to accept that first part of having our mind. And that's what Jesus plays his part. He's just this symbol that we can accept, this absolute pure love that looks at us, sees us with a pure mind, sees only the holiness in us. And if you can't get to that, all you need to do is just keep sitting with him and feeling it, and he will heal our minds from the belief in guilt. If it doesn't work the first time, just keep doing it. Just keep going back there and saying, okay, Jesus, I'm going to sit with you again today. Show me what you see. Tell me how you see me. I want to know. So is there any questions, or will we just, it feels nice just to let the group go and remain in that state of awareness that you're in. Let's just stay there. Did anyone that asked for help, did anyone get any experience of just feeling a little lighter? Okay, Rachel said it was beautiful. So we'll do that. We'll do that at the end of each group. So if you are feeling overwhelmed, you can, we'll do it as a regular thing. So know that if you join the group, you can be lifted up. And the other thing, if you want to, you can just sit there and think, how would Cate see me? If that feels easier. Because I know if I, looking at everyone, I only see the perfect Christ, the absolute beautiful holiness of everyone. So if you can't get to Jesus, just come look at me. Thank you everyone for joining. Beautiful meeting. Thank you. See you next week. Bye-bye.